I tried to beat a hardcore Nuzlocke challenge of Pokémon Diamond using only grass types. Grass types are great. I mean, they're only weak to fire attacks, flying attacks, bug attacks, ice attacks, and poison attacks, all of which are super common in Sinnoh. Combine that with the hardcore Nuzlocke rule set, meaning that any Pokemon that faints is dead forever, and I can only catch one grass type per new area, and this challenge may be a little bit harder than I thought. My first encounter in this challenge is Cactus the Turtwig, who we immediately bring in the fight against Rourke and his rock types. Grass types beat rock, so this should be a pretty easy matchup. Rourke leads off with Geodude, and I with Cactus, who immediately destroys the Ball and Arms with a single super effective Razor Leaf. This causes Rourke to send in his second Pokemon, the Rock Snake Onix. Onix is able to outspeed, but just goes for a Screech. This means we can nail him with a Razor Leaf, which is just shy of the KO thanks to this thing's massive bulk. On the following turn, Rourke heals up his snake with a potion, and I go for a withdrawal to compensate for the Screech. For whatever reason, Onix then goes for a Screech to negate the withdrawal on the following turn, as Razor Leaf then gets a critical hit for the clean KO. Nice. This just leaves Rourke's final Pokemon, a Cranidos. This thing is really scary. In a neutral defense, we don't survive a critical hit Headbutt. In order for attempt 1 to continue, we need to dodge a critical hit here. Rourke shows me Headbutt, and Cactus lives with just 5 HP to spare. This means that we're in overgrow range, boosting our grass type moves, and a super powered Razor Leaf picks up the KO, winning me the battle and the first gym badge. Although I gotta say that was a bit too close for comfort. As a reward for our first gym badge, we can get our second encounter being a Budew. Budew will be an amazing Pokemon later with a grass and poison type combination. We can also evolve Cactus into his second stage being Grottle. This is before we arrive in Floroma Town, where we have a lot of stuff to do. We have 2 encounters to pick up from Honey Trees and a commander fight with a demonic Purugly. Honey Tree encounters are actually pretty annoying, as the Pokemon you want takes forever to find. An encounter also takes forever to find because you have to wait real world hours. After a ton of random Cumbies and Wurmples, luck turns our way and we get a Cherubi. Yeah, all that work for a freaking Cherubi. Welcome to the team, I guess. In the second tree, I can get a Burmy. Burmy's actually not that bad of an encounter as you might think. For starters, Rose evolves into a Wormadam before the level cap. A secondary bug typing also gives us coverage from opposing bug types, and he gets access to the move Psychic later down the line. Shifting gears a little bit by raising Jade's friendship to the max by walking around the town, he evolves into Roselia, who is a Pokemon I don't think I've ever used before. With all of these upgrades, we can face Commander Mars with a Zubat and a demonic Purugly. Zubat isn't that much of an issue even with a quad resistance to grass types. The Purugly is a bigger issue because it hits like a truck and is faster than the legendary Pokemon Latios. I'm not even joking. Against the Zubat, I send out Cactus, who's able to outspeed and goes for a Leech Life for a bit of damage. We respond with a Curse, lowering our speed but raising our attack and defense stats. Thanks to the defense boost, Zubat can't touch us even with super effective attacks, and a few curses later we're all set up. A tackle on the subsequent turn destroys Zubat, bringing out the scary cat. Purugly outspeeds and goes for a feint attack for a bit of damage as Tackle connects. Unfortunately, the damage is just enough that Purugly heals up with a held Oran Berry. Thankfully, Purugly just goes for a weak scratch on the following turn, so it's basically over. From there, another tackle takes out the cat, winning me what is normally a pretty hard battle. After this fight is over, we can once again get another encounter, being an Eevee in the PC. Eevee is a Pokemon that is normally locked behind the postgame, but a level 10 Eevee was given out via an event back in 2007. To the keyboard warriors in the comments saying, "Oh, he's cheating, he's not playing legit, you suck, you need to die." Keep in mind, this run has never been completed on YouTube before, and this run is most likely impossible without Eevee. Instead, I advise the keyboard warriors to tell me their favorite evolution and subscribe to the channel. I post daily Pokemon Nuzlockes. Anyway, by going near the Moss Rock in Eterna Forest, I can evolve Eevee into a Leafeon who has a ton of bulk to work with. This is seriously a phenomenal pickup. This brings me to the fight against my arch nemesis, Gardenia, and her grass types for badge number 2. Gardenia leads off with Cherubi and I with Cactus. Cherubi can't really touch us for meaningful damage, so after setting up a few curses, a bite on the following turn destroys the cherry. This brings out Gardenia's second Pokemon, a Roserade, whose poison typing makes it a bit scary. Psych, a poison sting only does a whopping 2 damage thanks to the defense boost, and even though we do get poisoned, a bite one-shots Roserade. This just leaves Gardenia with her final Pokemon being a Turtwig. That was a pretty easy second gym badge. I do know setup strats are boring, and I will try to minimize them in this playthrough. From here, I will try to minimize setup sweeps unless absolutely possible. After this battle, Tulip, the Pokemon I caught in the Honey Tree, evolves into Cherim, which may get some screen time. Eventually, who knows. Shifting gears, we have another commander fight against Jupiter, who is the standard disposable Zubat in addition to a Stung Tank. Against the Zubat, I don't set up any curses with Cactus, so even though we best the bat, we don't have as much HP to work with against Stun Tank. Since Cactus can't do much, I switch out to Rose on a Poison Gas, which puts Rose on a timer. This isn't good, but it's not awful. What is awful is Stuntank going for a Smokescreen on the following turn, lowering our accuracy, and I miss Hidden Power. After eating a Night Slash, which luckily doesn't crit, a Hidden Power hits, and even with a crit, it doesn't even do half. I need to sack Rose, which sucks this early on. But Skuntank then goes for a Screech on the following turn, meaning Hidden Power connects. Unfortunately, it brings the Skunk into Citrus Berry range, meaning all of my hard work is undone. I decide to spare Rose's life, even though a sack would have been better. I elect to bring Jaden on a Smokescreen, lowering his accuracy. Not great. After once again taking another Smokescreen and getting me to -2 accuracy, I'm able to nail Skuntank with a Leech Seed, which drains its HP each turn. Skuntank then gets Jade to -3 accuracy on the following turn instead of attacking. I don't have any good moves, so I hit a Resisted Magical Leaf, which crits for the KO. This wins me the battle, and I have to say there were so many points where that could have gone south, but didn't. Of course, right after this is a rival fight with our rival Kai, who does actually pose a threat. He does have a Flying and a Fire-type Pokemon, which both pose super effective damage into my team of Grass types. Luckily, his lead Starly is not fully evolved, so against it, I have Cactus set up a Curse. I know I said I wouldn't use setup strategies, but come on. We do have to tank a Wing Attack in the process, and Starly sets up a few double teams. This isn't a huge deal, and more so just wastes my time. It's a waiting game until a bite destroys the bird, causing Kai to send in his ace Monferno. This thing has Flame Wheel, which hits like a truck. For some reason, Monferno just goes for a Mach Punch, which doesn't do that much damage thanks to our defense boost. We then hit a Razor Leaf, which crits, but is just shy of the KO. The turn then repeats itself with Monferno going for a weak Mach Punch, as we then pick up the KO with a non-crit Razor Leaf. Kai's next two Pokemon aren't that big of a deal and are walled by Cactus, winning me the battle. I then arrive in Heart Home City, where there's once again a decent amount of stuff to do here. For starters, I can indulge in everyone's favorite pastime, gambling. Okay, but seriously, the amount of gambling reels I see is insane. I sometimes wonder if people are okay. The gambling does actually have a purpose, as I can pick up a bunch of TMs and health items, all of which are super useful for upcoming fights. The second objective this town holds for us is a fight against Maylene and our fighting types for the third gym badge. As Maylene leads off with Meditite, I bring out Cactus to square off against the fighter child. I'm honestly not sure what this thing is based on. Meditite is able to outspeed, but thanks to a weak special attack stat, it really doesn't do that much damage. This means Cactus is free to set up a Reflect, raising our team's defense, which I bought from the game corner. With our entire team's defense raised, we are really in a great spot. Meditite on the following turn then just goes for a useless Meditate, raising its attack before a bite does exactly 50%. This is good because another bite will KO on the following turn, but Meditite has Drain Punch, giving it some HP back. As a result, bite is just shy of the KO. Maylene does heal up, but it's not enough to save Meditite, who falls to a bite. This causes Maylene to show me her second Pokemon, Machoke. Since I don't think I can deal with this thing, I switch into Jade on a Rock Tomb that lowers my speed. I then switch to Rose on the following turn, as Machoke wastes time by going for Leer for whatever reason. I then go for a Protect to scout out what move this thing is going for. I didn't realize this until later, but the AI in Diamond and Pearl is completely random. I probably should have stayed in with Rose because it really doesn't matter. Anyway, after eating a soft Brick Break for about a quarter of my HP, a Psychic in Retaliation destroys Machoke. See, I told you Wormadam wasn't useless. Last for Maylene is our Pride Steel-type Lucario, who doesn't take super effective damage from Psychic-type moves. I once again go for a useless Protect just to stall for a little bit because this thing is kind of scary. After eating a pretty hard Force Palm on the following turn, which luckily doesn't paralyze, we can go for a Psychic. However, it doesn't even do 50% of this thing's HP. Maybe Wormadam isn't that good after all. On the following turn, I Protect just to stall a little bit. And then Lucario goes for a Force Palm, which paralyzes us. However, it doesn't matter because on the following turn, a Psychic crit is more than enough for the KO, winning me the battle. Okay, Wormadam, I take back anything I said about you. You truly are the GOAT. After this, we can head to the Safari Zone where I pick up a Carnivine. This actually took me 20 minutes to find. As much as I love Sinnoh, they really ruin the Safari Zone. Either way, Carnivine is a decent pickup, but sort of lacks a niche in this challenge. Immediately after picking up this encounter, I can fight the Water-type gym leader, Crasher Wake. Wake has a Gyarados who doesn't take super effective damage from grass moves and Floatzel with Ice Fang, so this isn't going to be the easiest thing ever. Wake leads off with the aforementioned Gyarados, and I bring out Tulip for her debut battle. I can't lead with one of my good Pokemon directly thanks to Intimidate, so Tulip is basically fodder. Tulip is actually able to outspeed Gyarados and goes for a Sunny Day to weaken water moves and transforms. All Gyarados can do is go for a Dragon Rage, only doing 40 HP. On the following turn, I try to go for a Leech Seed, but we miss and Gyarados connects with a Swagger, confusing me. This means Tulip is basically useless from here on out. I decide to keep Tulip alive, so I Heart Swap to Basil on a Dragon Rage. Fortunately, we have just enough HP so we can take another. However, even if we didn't, this doesn't matter because we have Natural Gift. For those who don't know, Natural Gift is a move that changes type depending on the berry that the Pokemon is holding. This means by holding a Pecha Berry, we have an electric type move, which is of course always enough to KO Gyarados. Natural Gift is huge in this playthrough, and without the move, this run would probably be impossible. Anyway, next out for Wake is Floatzel, and this is where I made a mistake. When Basil KO'd Gyarados, he grew all the way to level 31. Normally, overleveling wouldn't be an issue as long as the Pokemon is at the level cap at the start of the battle. However, Basil is an event Pokemon, and it isn't mine. This means he won't obey until after we beat the fight. After Floatzel outspeeds and goes for a Pursuit, which rudely crits, we can restore massive HP with Synthesis thanks to the Sun. I try to go for a Razor Leaf on the following turn, but Basil doesn't obey. Instead, he just goes for a Quick Attack for a bit of damage, as Floatzel just goes for a Resisted Brine, which also does a bit of damage. Fortunately, Basil is able to get his act together on the following turn. After Floatzel goes for a random Brine, doing a bit of damage, we can retaliate with a super effective Razor Leaf. Fortunately, the Razor Leaf is more than enough for the KO. This just leaves Wake's final Pokemon being a Quagsire. Despite the lack of following orders, I stay in since Quagsire can't really do much. Turn 1 Basil outspeeds, but goes for a Natural Gift, which is a one-time use move, so it fails. Quagsire in retaliation just goes for a Tail Whip, which doesn't really matter. Like I said, Quagsire can't touch us, so after a while we can pick up the KO with a quad super effective Razor Leaf. It even crits to add insult to injury. This wins me the 4th gym badge, and I gotta say that was way harder than it should have been. After the fight, Cactus evolves into his final form, Torterra, who's able to solo Kai's entire team outside of Pastoria City. However, this brings me to an encounter with the scariest trainer in all of Pokemon, Cynthia. She makes me visit her grandmother, and this whole interaction is just so random. We literally visit her once, get a lore dump, and that's it. We never see or hear from this woman again. It's honestly bizarre, and I really hope she's okay nearly 18 years later. I don't have time to think about it, however, because I have to take on Fantina in a fight where 2 of her 3 Pokemon can hit my grass types for super effective damage. Fantina leads off with the scary flying type Drifloon and I with Basil. Fortunately, we can outspeed and go for an electric type Natural Gift, which does not KO. As a result, Basil leads a Gust, which doesn't even do half. However, I don't really have any good moves left to hit this thing, so I need to swap. I switch into Spider, the Carnivine, for his debut battle on an Ominous Wind, which luckily doesn't get the Omni boost. After taking a second Ominous Wind on the following turn, a Dark-type Fan Attack picks up the KO. Fantina then shows me Gengar, and thanks to the Ominous Winds from Drifloon, we are pretty low on HP. I swap into Cactus on a Poison Jab for neutral damage thanks to our Ground type. On the following turn, Gengar goes for a second Poison Jab for decent damage. In retaliation, Cactus goes for a Sword Stance from the game corner to raise his attack to +2. Gengar then decides to switch things up by going for a Shadow Claw. This leaves me deep in the yellow before a super effective bite destroys Gengar. This leaves Fantina with her back against the wall and her final Pokemon being her ace Mismagius. Even with a crit Magical Leaf, Mismagius can never KO us. This means I can go for a bite which destroys Mismagius, winning me the battle and the 5th gym badge. That was way easier than Wake. After this in Canalave City, I have a rival fight with Kai. His team is actually pretty scary as 3 of his 5 Pokemon have a way to hit me for super effective damage. Against the Staravia, I used an Electric-type Natural Gift from Basil, which unfortunately does not pick up the KO. This means Staravia goes for an annoying double team. Luckily, we do have Aerial Ace, which never misses, so that takes care of that. Second is Heracross, who we simply outspeed and destroy with a quad super effective Aerial Ace. Third out in Barry's lineup is Monferno. Like his predecessors, he takes a ton of damage from a super effective Aerial Ace. Still, it does not KO, and a Flameal connects, doing a ton of damage. Luckily, no crit, so we then take out Monferno on the following turn with another Aerial Ace. Barry's final 2 Pokemon don't really matter and are easy picking, so that wins me a pretty easy battle. From here, it's off to face Byron and his Steel-type team for badge number 6. Normally, Byron is pretty easy, although he may be a bit harder than normal. Byron leads off with Bronzor and I with Basil. We don't have any fire moves, so a Cherry Berry Fire-type Natural Gift is the best we have. Unfortunately, it does not KO, and Bronzor nails Basil with a Confuse Ray. I can't really risk anything, so I swap to Spider as Bronzor goes for a Hypnosis, which actually connects and puts me to sleep. This is really bad, because on the first turn of sleep, Bronzor goes for a Confuse Ray. This means my chances of attacking have completely plummeted. To add insult to injury, Spider stays asleep on the second turn, and Bronzor gets off a Flash Cannon, which crits. Luckily, through all of that, Spider wakes up, and on the following turn, he retaliates with a second Fire-type Natural Gift for the KO. Second out is Steelix, who completely walls Spider, so I need to swap. The obvious choice is Cactus on a weak Gyro Ball, only doing a bit of damage. On the following turn, a super effective Earthquake does a ton of damage to Steelix. However, it fails to KO, meaning Steelix goes for a Dragon Breath for like 10 HP. Steelix is definitely not saving himself and goes down to an Earthquake on the following turn. This just leaves Byron with his Bastiodon, and this thing can be pretty scary with Metal Sound. I set up a Sword Stance to raise my attack, not that I need it, as Bastiodon oddly goes for a rest even though it has full HP. Since we are at +2, Earthquake destroys Bastiodon on the following turn, winning me the battle and the 6th gym badge. After this, I'm supposed to help Barry, Dawn, and Rowan defeat Team Galactic, but come on, I mean, who has time for that? Instead, I can go to Iron Island where I can watch an epic cutscene and pick up the Shiny Stone. Remember Jade from way earlier in the playthrough? Well, I used a Shiny Stone to evolve him into his final form, being Roserade. Roserade is a fantastic Pokemon, as you'll see later. Could you imagine if this Magikarp evolved or something? That probably would be the end of Team Plasma. Making my way to Snow Point City, I can pick up Lettuce the Snover on Route 207, whose ice typing gives me a great answer into flying types. Snover on its own isn't really that impressive, but when I evolve him into Abomasnow, he instantly becomes one of the best team members we have. The 7th gym fight is upon us, and it's against Candace and her ice types. This is terrifying, but fortunately for us, 2 of our Pokemon are weak to fire type attacks. One of them isn't even an ice type, and Sneasel is actually pretty scary due to its speed. Anyway, Candace leads off with Snover, and I with Lettuce, who sets up the Hail with a Snow Warning. This isn't ideal since it gives Candace's ice type moves a power boost. Still, we outspeed and set up a Sword Stance, raising our attack to +2 before Snover connects with an Avalanche, barely touching us at all. On the following turn, we once again set up a Sword Stance, getting to +4 as Snover just wastes time by going for an Ingrain. I then set up the final Sword Stance on the following turn, getting us to +6 attack as Snover doesn't even bring me below half with an Avalanche. From there, a neutral +6 priority Ice Shard destroys Snover before it even knew what was coming. Second out is Medicham, who just wastes time going for a Detect before an Ice Shard on the following turn picks up the KO. If we did not have Ice Shard, Medicham would have actually been super scary since none of my Pokemon outspeed. Anyway, that's besides the point, as third from Candace is Sneasel, and I don't really have a choice but to stay in. A resisted priority Ice Shard actually does decent damage, as Sneasel then nails me with a soft Feint attack. From there, Candace uses a full restore, however it doesn't really matter because after an Ice Shard we are back in the same spot. Only this time Candace does not heal up, allowing me to take Sneasel out. This just leaves our final Pokemon, Abomasnow. We could probably KO with an Ice Shard, but I don't want to risk anything, so I swap into Basil, who comes in on a Wood Hammer. It does a ton of damage due to a critical hit, and after Hail Chip we are left pretty low. However, this does not matter because with a Fire-type Natural Gift we can easily outspeed and take Abomasnow out on the following turn. This wins me a pretty easy 7th gym badge. But we're not done yet, because this brings me to one of the scariest fights I've ever had to plan for in all of Pokemon. Cyrus. He has the most anti-grass type team ever, with all of his Pokemon having a way to hit all my grass types for super effective damage. Things could easily get out of hand fast, and I could easily lose the run. Fortunately, we only have to fight Cyrus twice. The first fight isn't as bad as the second one, as none of Cyrus's Pokemon are fully evolved. Cyrus leads off with Murkrow, and I bring out my best option, Lettuce. A Nightshade only does a bit of damage on turn 1, as we take the opportunity to set up a Sword Stance. On the following turn, a priority Ice Shard is more than enough to take this thing out, causing Cyrus to send in a second Pokemon, Golbat. However, at +2, Ice Shard is always more than enough to take Golbat out, who isn't as bulky as his fully evolved counterpart. This just leaves Cyrus's final Pokemon, a Sneasel, who gets off a weak Quick Attack before a return destroys him, winning me the battle. Although that first fight was just the appetizer. The real fight lies ahead. After Cyrus uses the Red Chain to awaken Dialga, it's our responsibility to fight him, I guess, even though we're 10 years old. Cyrus leads off with this fully evolved Honchkrow, and I bring in Lettuce to set the snow up, and because he's my best answer to 2 of Cyrus's flying types. I know we can always take an attack, but Honchkrow simply outspeeds and goes for a useless Embargo. This means I can set up my Sword Stance completely for free. On the following turn, an Ice Shard picks off Honchkrow, who otherwise could have been a pretty scary threat. Second out is Crobat, and Ice Shard is actually arranged to KO thanks to this thing's massive bulk. Even giving Lettuce a bunch of attack EVs also does not guarantee the KO. That's how bulky Crobat is. Crobat will then respond with a random move with a 50% chance of that move being super effective, and that would put us in a lot of trouble. But I have to risk it. I click Ice Shard, but it doesn't KO. However, Crobat just goes for a bite, doing only a little bit of HP, and then Hail Chip takes him out. This just leaves Cyrus with half of his team left. Third out is the scary Weavile. I know we could take one X-Scissor from this HP range, so I risk a critical hit, which luckily does not happen. This means a quad super effective Brick Break at +2 destroys Weavile. With his back against the wall, this leaves Cyrus with his final Pokemon, Gyarados. With no electric or rock move, we can't dance with this thing, so I need to swap. I send in Basil, who comes in on a resisted Earthquake, and then on the following turn, we unleash an Electric-type Natural Gift, which is barely shy of the KO. This allows Gyarados to hit a nasty Ice Fang, which would have KO'd if it crit. Luckily, thanks to Hail Chip, it doesn't matter, because Gyarados falls and I win the battle. That took forever to plan, but the solution turned out to be a lot easier than I expected. Ah yes, Sunny Shore City. Let's see what we have here. Oh no! Anyway, the final gym leader Volcaner is upon us, and the final fight is really underwhelming. Against Raichu, Cactus sets up a Swords Dance and KOs Raichu with an Earthquake on the following turn. Octillery falls to a Razor Leaf, and even with Intimidate, Luxray can't stand an Earthquake. Ambipom also meets the same fate and falls to an Earthquake, so that wins me a pretty easy 8th and final gym badge. I can also pick up my final encounter from an event in South Korea. South Korea is totally a place I've been to. This is the only way to get Tangrowth in Diamond, and without it the league is probably going to be impossible, so I made a judgment call. I'm not a fan of using event Pokemon in Nuzlocke unless absolutely necessary, but this is the only way to get Tangrowth in Diamond, and without it the league is probably impossible. Before I can take on the league, I have a final rival fight with Kai, who has 5 Pokemon that can hit grass types or super effective damage. However, thanks to the level cap, we have a ton of wiggle room to work with. Kai leads off with Staraptor, and I with Jade to absorb the Intimidate. I forgot to give Jade the choice specs, but even without them, a Sludge Bomb is more than enough for the clean one-shot. Second is Infernape, and remember how useful I said Jade would be? Well, he outspeeds and sets up a Rain Dance to nerf the incoming Flamethrower. This means that Weather Ball is now a Water-type move, meaning we can outspeed and take out what is normally a pretty scary Pokemon. Second out is Snorlax, who we can't really hit. I decide to bring out Lettuce on a somewhat hard Body Slam, although it unfortunately paralyzes, which sucks. Snorlax has taken Hail Chip, so for whatever reason, he goes for a rest to gain like 12 HP back and puts itself to sleep. On the following turn, Kai does something weird and swaps out to Heracross, who tanks the incoming Brick Break, which is obviously resisted. Since we can't really do anything to Heracross, I have to swap, so I send in Basil. He tanks the incoming Aerial Ace pretty well thanks to our sheer bulk. On the following turn, we respond with our own Aerial Ace, which is quad super effective and destroys Heracross. The same fate applies to Kai's Roserade, who also falls to a couple of super effective Aerial Aces. Last is Floatzel, so I swap to our newest member, Tomato, on a Crunch. If you thought that Bagel was bulky, wait till you see Tomato. On the following turn, an Aqua Jet hits for a pathetic amount of damage before a single power-up destroys Floatzel. This just leaves Kai with his final Pokemon in a Sleep Snorlax. For this thing, we simply outspeed and KO with a critical hit power-up, winning me the battle. But just like that, we're on to the Elite Four. 5 final trainers await me, and some of these teams are plain scary. Aaron is running a team full of bugs. Bertha isn't actually scary at all. Flint is pretty scary with 2 fire types and all of his Pokemon being super hard to deal with. Lucian in general is pretty hard with his psychic types, and then there's Cynthia. Cynthia is infamous for crushing dreams and Nuzlocks. A bunch of Pokemon on her team can hit my team for super effective damage, and then there's her Garchomp, which is absolutely terrifying. I don't know how we're gonna do this. Here's my final team leveled up to the cap of 63. Let's do this. First in the Elite Four is Aaron, who uses bug types. Fortunately, we have a massive level advantage, so that helps a lot. Against the Beautifly Dustox, we simply outspeed and one-shot them with an Aerial Ace apiece from Basil. His third Pokemon, Vespiquen, actually lives in Aerial Ace with about half HP and goes for a Defend order, raising its defense. This means that Aerial Ace will not KO on the following turn. Still, I stay in and I go for an Aerial Ace, which is just shy of the KO like I predicted. Vespiquen, for whatever reason, then goes for a Heal order, taking it out of healing range. Despite being a bug type, a bad one at that, Vespiquen can't really hit us. So I decide to stay in and fire off an Aerial Ace, which does not KO. But all Vespiquen does is go for a resisted rock type power gem, doing a little bit of damage. Since I know Aaron is going to heal up, I take the time to set up a Sword Stance to raise my attack. However, even being super effective and at +2, Aerial Ace is nowhere near the KO. In retaliation, Vespiquen does go for a super effective attack order, but it doesn't really matter. We outspeed and pick off the B on the following turn with a final Aerial Ace. Fourth is Heracross, and like with Kai's Heracross, we simply outspeed and pick it off with a single Aerial Ace. And last is Drapion, who isn't a bug type. It's a Dark and Poison type, which really confused me as a kid. Aerial Ace is nowhere near enough for the KO, and a Poison move would absolutely destroy us, so I need to swap. I decide to bring in Cactus, as Drapion just goes for an X-Scissor. On the following turn, Drapion goes for a super effective Aerial Ace. Take a shot each time I say the word Aerial Ace. We then respond with an Earthquake, which is just shy of the KO. However, a Citrus Berry takes Drapion out of healing range, but suddenly we're in a lot of trouble. Because if Drapion goes for an Ice Fang, we lose Cactus and the run is over. We have to hope that Drapion doesn't see the KO with Ice Fang. But Ice Fang comes out, and it's over. I'm just kidding, I attached a Yache Berry to Cactus. So with that, a final Earthquake KOs Drapion, winning me the battle and the first fight in the Elite Four. Is the Ground-type trainer Bertha, who is by far the easiest member. She brings out Quagsire, and I lead with Cactus. Quagsire wastes time by going for a Protect for whatever reason on turn 1, but it doesn't matter because we then take it out with a quad super effective Razor Leaf. Sorry buddy, you're still a good Pokemon. Second is Wishcash, who manages to outspeed and goes for an Aqua Tail, doing a little bit of damage before he meets the same fate as Quagsire. Yeah, that water type is not doing it any favors. Third is Sudowoodo, who is not quad weak to Razor Leaf. Still, a Razor Leaf does do great damage and leaves it in the yellow, as Sudowoodo opts for an Earthquake, which only does a little bit of damage into Cactus. This means we can then pick up the KO on the following turn with another Razor Leaf. This causes Bertha to send in her ace Hippowdon, who sets the stand up with its ability. We outspeed and a Razor Leaf does less than half, but the return Earthquake also does way less than half. On the following turn, I go for an Earthquake just to see if that will do more damage, but it doesn't. Fortunately, Hippowdon is pulled out of healing range with a Citrus Berry and responds with an Earthquake. We then outspeed and then destroy Hippowdon with a follow-up Razor Leaf. Take a shot every time I say Razor Leaf. Last is Golem, and I thought this thing had Sturdy, so I swapped to Tomato on a Gyro Ball for a whopping 13 HP. On the following turn, a quad super effective Power Whip destroys Golem, winning me a pretty easy battle. Third is another challenging member, Flint, and his less than 50% Fire Team. Flint leads off with Rapidash, who is pretty scary, and I with Cactus. I try to go for an Earthquake, but we miss because Rapidash goes up in the air for a Bounce. Still, I stay in, and on the following turn, Bounce does a ton of damage and even paralyzes. But through all that, we can respond with an Earthquake for the instant KO. Second out is the Flying type Drifloon. I stay in, but for some reason it baton passes to Infernape. Infernape obviously only takes a sliver from my crunch thanks to its fighting type. I could stay in, but I don't want to lose Cactus, so I decide to switch to Jade on a hard Earthquake. Realizing I can't set up the rain and go for Weather Ball, I have to swap again, this time to Basil. Basil comes in on a Thunder Punch, only doing a little bit of damage fortunately. We are then outsped and get hit by a resisted Earthquake on the following turn. In response, we follow up with an Aerial Ace, leaving Monferno deep in the yellow. Infernape does heal up with a Health Citrus Berry, which is unfortunate because Aerial Ace won't KO on the following turn. Fortunately, we have a trick up our sleeve because after tanking a resisted Thunder Punch, we can go underground for a Dig. Unfortunately, I forgot Earthquake can hit underground, but it only does a little bit of damage before we can KO with a Dig. I know the AI is completely random, but I'm shocked Infernape never rolled a Flare Blitz. Either way, that takes care of Flint's fire types, but we're not done with this fight as Drifloon comes back in. Since we are low, I swap to Lettuce to set the hail up as we get burned by Will-O-Wisp, which reduces our attack. Unfortunate, but okay. On the following turn, Drifloon again baton passes, this time to Steelix, who takes a ton of damage from a perfectly accurate Blizzard. I thought an Ice Shard from this range would KO Steelix, but it barely leaves him alive on a Sliver, but all he does in retaliation is go for a Screech. Flint uses a full restore on the following turn, and I once again hit a Blizzard, which actually gets the freeze. This means I can then pick Steelix off with another Blizzard. For the third time, Drifloon comes in, but luckily doesn't baton pass, but rather sets up a double team. This doesn't matter because in Gen 4 and only Gen 4, Blizzard always hits in the hail. So using my final Blizzard PP, we can take out Drifloon. Last is Lopunny, and thanks to all the burn damage, we are super low. I decide to swap out to Tamando, who gets his attack lowered by Charm, which is kind of unfortunate. It doesn't really matter because we get a critical hit with Power Whip on the following turn, winning me the battle, and I gotta say that was the weirdest AI I have ever seen. Last in the Elite Four is Lucian and his Psychic types. He brings out Mr. Mime, and I bring out Cactus. Mr. Mime loves going for screens and goes for a light screen as we take the opportunity to go for a Rock Polish to raise our speed. I then set up a Swords Dance on the following turn as Psychic does a respectable amount of my HP. I then take the opportunity to set up a second Swords Dance as Psychic brings me deep in the yellow. But that doesn't matter because it's go time. From here, a +4 Crunch destroys Mr. Mime. Lucian's team then follows suit, winning me what is normally a pretty scary battle. But now it's time for the final fight in the game against Champion Cynthia, and all my childhood memories are haunting me. All of her Pokemon are terrifying. This is an all-star team and we are going to have to put the maximum effort to win this fight. Either way, it all ends here. Cynthia leads off with Spiritomb and I with Lettuce, who sets the hail up. We are speed tied and I go for a Blizzard, doing exactly half, as the Spirit Human in retaliation just goes for a Dark Pulse. Fortunately, it doesn't do too much damage and we can pick up the KO on the following turn with another Blizzard. This brings in Cynthia's second Pokemon, Lucario, and Lettuce has to go down here so I can get a free swap. This means with a heavy heart, I fire off an Ice Shard. And Lucario anticlimactically goes for a Psychic, meaning Lettuce lives and ruins my monologue. But then, on the following turn, we fire off a final Ice Shard and Lucario goes for an Aura Sphere, destroying Lettuce. RIP, you truly were a great Pokemon. Fortunately, we have Cactus, who comes in and eats a Psychic. On the following turn, we then go for an Earthquake, which destroys Lucario. Third out is Milotic, and like Lettuce, Cactus has to go down as well. Cactus was my starter and by far my best Pokemon, but now in the final fight, he has to go so I can get a clean swap. Milotic is just too terrifying with an Ice-type attack, and I can't risk anything. Milotic then anticlimactically goes for a Surf, meaning Cactus lives and we hit a Crunch, doing a decent amount of damage. We are speed tied, so we do outspeed and go for a Crunch, doing decent damage once more, as Milotic anticlimactically fails a Mirror Coat. But then on the following turn, Milotic goes for a Surf to take Cactus out, where he joins Lettuce in the Great Beyond. RIP. You were here from the beginning, and it's a shame you didn't get to see the end. In his place, I have Spider come in, who really hasn't done much, but now it's his time to shine. Spider can KO Milotic as long as Ice Beam doesn't crit or freeze. Ice Beam comes out, and we live, but we get frozen, and with our own Hail Chip, Spider falls, adding to the death count. Honestly, I'm not even upset, as Spider was kind of useless. That was honestly such a weird death. In Spider's place, I have Basil come in, who goes for a Swords Dance, as Milotic then just goes for a Surf, doing a little bit of damage. Unfortunately, thanks to Hail Chip, Milotic is in healing range, so Cynthia heals up, and even at +2, Aerial Ace doesn't even do half on the following turn. Still, we can then outspeed, and Aerial Ace is just shy of the KO like I predicted. However, this doesn't matter, because all Milotic does is fail a Mirror Coat and then falls to Hail Chip. 2 can play at that game, Cynthia. Fourth out is Roserade, who we simply outspeed and KO with a +2 Aerial Ace, causing Cynthia to send in her penultimate Pokemon, Gastrodon. And Basil has to go down as well. We don't have a grass move to take Gastrodon with, and I don't want a Heart Switch. Aerial Ace does exactly half, as a Sludge Bomb in response destroys Basil, losing me one of my best Pokemon. However, in his place, Tomato comes in and outspeeds to KO Gastrodon with a quad super effective Power Whip. This just leaves Cynthia's final Pokemon, Garchomp. We only have 2 Pokemon left, and this thing is 3 levels higher than all of them. I plan to do as much damage with Tomato until he falls, and then KO Garchomp with an Ice-type Weather Ball from Jade. For whatever reason, Garchomp goes for a Resisted Earthquake, which we sponge pretty well, before we respond with a Power Whip, doing less than half. Unfortunately, Hail Chip brings Garchomp into Citrus Berry range, and he heals up a ton of HP as a result. We then sponge a Dragon Rush on the following turn, leaving us in the yellow, as Power Up once again brings Garchomp deep in the yellow. Sadly, with Hail Chip, Cynthia then heals Garchomp back to full on the following turn, which undoes all of my progress. Still, a combination of my Power Whip and Hail Chip leave Garchomp in the yellow. However, Hail Chip is a double-sided sword and we are super low and in the red. Even with a special attack boost from a held Peyote Berry, Tomato needs to fall here. You were on the team for the shortest amount of time, but still put in a ton of work. With the heavy heart, I prepare to lose my 5th Pokemon of the match. But Garchomp goes for a Brick Break, meaning Tomato lives with 4 HP and goes for a Power Whip. But it's just shy of the KO. So we both fall to Hail Chip. But that doesn't matter, because I've just been a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Diamond using only grass types. I gotta say, that was a super fun run, but it wasn't as hard as I expected it to be. Diamond and Pearl are way easier than Platinum, and this challenge would have definitely been a lot harder in Platinum. But I didn't want to do this challenge in Platinum because I've always wanted to be the first person on YouTube to do it in Diamond. Just on a personal note, Diamond and Pearl aren't really good to Nuzlocke because of the random AI, which is really annoying, but is also kind of fun. The MVP of the run was hands down Cactus, who helped with major segments of the game and was great overall. Basil and Lettuce weren't far behind as well. I was honestly surprised to see how good Tomato was. I've never used a Tangrowth before, and it just really put in the work. But hey, that's the beauty of Nuzlockes, using Pokemon that you normally don't use. I was pretty surprised that large segments of the playthrough were basically done by 3 Pokemon and 3 Pokemon only. Sword stance was also really broken, and I am trying to move away from set-it moves, but sometimes they're your only option. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more Nuzlockes. You should also follow my Twitter or X, which is linked in the description down below. That's all I have to say, and until next time, I'll see you.